Good morning. We'll call this meeting of the House Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee to order. Clerk, please take the roll.
Representative Fritz, Grills, Hardaway, Harris, Holsey, Hurt, Jones, Marsh, Martin, Reedy, Ritchie, Shaw, Travis, Beidle, Wright, Vice Chairman Darby, Chairman Todd. Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you so much. I would ask Representative Marsh to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and a prayer. If everyone would stand and join us, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pray with me. Dear Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for your beautiful weather. Thank you for springtime. Please give us wisdom, understanding, and compassion to do the best job we can for the state of Tennessee. All these things we ask in your precious Son's name. Amen. Salute, pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Get this show going. Thank you for that. Any personal orders this morning? Seeing none? Oh, Representative Hardaway, sorry, I missed you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a note, and it's a solemn note that this is the anniversary, as dark as it may be, for the Covenant staff and children who were murdered. And I would ask that we take a moment and offer silent prayers for the comfort and care of the families of their fellow students, friends of the victims of the Covenant tragedy.
Thank you for that, sir. We'll take a moment now.
Amen.
Thank you. Any other personal orders? Seeing none, I want to talk about sturgeon this morning. A unique fish vital to the biological diversity in Tennessee is the sturgeon. In North America, there are 7 species found, 3 of them native to our state: the pallid sturgeon, shovelnose sturgeon, and lake sturgeon. Sturgeon are primitive fish and can weigh up to 300 pounds, reach lengths of 8 feet, and live for 150 years. They are among the largest freshwater fish and historically have been an important commercial species in this state. The lake sturgeon inhabits large rivers and lakes and is listed as endangered in our state. They are previously found in the Cumberland, Mississippi, and Tennessee rivers, and efforts are ongoing to reintroduce sturgeon to these waters. In the early 2000s, over 200,000 lake sturgeon were stocked in the Cumberland and Upper Tennessee River system as part of this initiative. The goal is to allow for this species to grow and expand and restore their populations to our state. However, this process will take decades. The Fishery Division of Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency monitors lake sturgeon annually to get data on growth, condition, movement, and population size. Given their endangered status, any caught sturgeon must be released, although the TWRA encourages anglers to report the time and location of the catch. Reporting assists the program by providing essential data on movement and growth critical for its success. We will now get into our calendar. We'll take up item number 1, House Bill 2038 by Representative Fritz. I have a motion and a second. Sir, you are recognized on House Bill 2038.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee, and I would appreciate your forbearance. If you wouldn't mind, if we could start with House Bill 2118, it will make the explanation roll better, and then we could go to 2038 next, with your permission, sir.
Okay, we have the motion and the second withdrawn. So with that, you're talking about item number 3, House Bill 2118. Do I have a motion? I have a motion and a second, sir. So you're recognized on House Bill 2118, and tell us what amendments you would like.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your patience. There's an amendment on this bill that makes the bill in drafting code 17401. This amendment replaces the amendment that was put on the bill in Ag Sub.
Have a motion second on amendment drafting code 017401, since it rewrites the bill. If you'd like to, we'll go ahead and put this on the bill. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. That drafting code 017401 goes on the bill now. So you are recognized on the bill as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if you and the committee will remember, there was also an amendment that was submitted by Chairman Reagan, and you'll see that that is captured within this bill now. We amended the language. That was something Chairman Reagan was doing to take care of the sunsetting clause on. So that's all incorporated in the bill. This amendment makes the other following changes. It overall takes what Executive Order 101, it does not attempt to negate or remove or impact at all the Governor Lee's Executive Order 101 that he issued establishing the $50 million nuclear supply chain. If you'll remember, we funded that last year. That group is set to expire in November of this year. So what we tried to do in this bill is take the code that had the State Energy Policy Advisory Council and hybridize with what the governor had pulled together to bring together a body that could then be instrumental and effective in designing energy policy for the state of Tennessee. It changes the appointees around some from what we had in both of those pieces of legislation. The governor gets 7 appointees in this, 6 of whom are voting. The Speaker of the House gets 6 appointees, and the Speaker of the Senate gets 6 appointees in this. That group then, on July 1st, will come together and appoint 3 other committee members, making a total of 22, which is a large size board, and I understand that. But it moves to position ourselves to build a bridge. And that bridge is very simply this. We have an ever-increasing demand on our electrical resources in the state of Tennessee. Tennessee is a favorable place for people to come and to live and to move and open their businesses, and that requires a steady supply of kilowatts for us to be able to do that. And so establishing this board under this configuration does several things to help us incorporate that. Most of us believe that our outlying future, the base load, is going to be nuclear provided. Today, many of us work in districts where we have nuclear plants today. The TVA effectively operates to make sure that we keep the lights on. So TVA is a part of this, this board that we're considering, in this bill that we're considering this morning. But we also know that with an ever-increasing demand and a current decrease in how many kilowatts we generate, that leaves us vulnerable economically. And so we want to make sure that we have people positioned, and you'll see that in the structure of the bill. I'll read through specifically some of those in just a moment as to how we would hope to accomplish that. We met with a large group of people on multiple occasions from TMEPA, from our electrical cooperatives, energy providers in the natural gas industry and the pipeline industry, to make sure that we understood the variables coming into this and that we get the right group of people assembled to be able to make good decisions and good policy recommendations to us. And I would submit to you, this bill does that. It brings disciplines together that understand everything from nuclear criticality safety to our university members, so that we can have a structured, forward-looking approach to energy in the state of Tennessee. I'll close with this and take any questions, Mr. Chairman. I think on a national level, sometimes now, and I don't mean this just to be critically, but on a national level, we often have political strategies that drive our energy decisions. What you have before you today, committee, is my attempt to help us move to energy strategies that drive our political decisions. And I think that is a much smarter path for us to go. You will see even some mention of the crude oil and pipeline in the structuring of this committee. And you may ask, well, why do we have that? If you're not from West Tennessee, you may not know that. Memphis, Tennessee has 1% of the nation's sweet crude refining capacity right now. I will be honest with you, as a Tennessean, I'd like to see that be 2%. I think there's lots of advantage to that. So So what you see here is my attempt to restructure this committee and get us a sound structure in place so that we can move forward. With that lengthy introduction, Mr. Chairman, I'll certainly take any questions.
Okay, do we have any questions or comments for the sponsor? Representative Hardaway?
Thank you, Chairman. And I'm trying to figure out with that philosophy of the needs and public policy driving political policy, how'd you end up here? You probably are not going to want to stay long, but I appreciate you getting that out and getting the committee in a position where we focus upon why we're really here, and that's to develop good public policy, and everything else is needs to take a back seat. On the structure of the committee, I agree with you. 22 is a lot of folks for a meeting of the minds. And having said that, who breaks the tie?
Representative Fritz?
Thank you very much. It's a great question. Only 21 of those are voting members. One of the members is a non-voting member. It's the person that comes from either the Department of Energy or an Oak Ridge entity that would be in the larger supply chain of nuclear supply that would be able to provide information but not be a voting member.
Representative Hardaway?
All right, thank you for that. And on the geographical diversity by grand division or by population usage and demands for energy, is that taken into account?
Representative Fritz?
Thank you. That is a great question. It's not worded specifically, so many from each grand division. Today, if you look at what I think is going to be our outlying base load, Tennessee has approximately 225 nuclear type industries across the state. This information comes from the East Tennessee Economic Council. Of those 225, 175 of them are located in Knoxville or Oak Ridge. That's kind of the hub of the uranium nuclear universe for the entire world, to be honest. But I think by the distribution of who we've assigned this committee, some of that will solve itself. For instance, the crude oil or the oil pipelines, we don't have that in East Tennessee. That's going to be something I think that's going to be a West Tennessee region kind of thing for that person who contributes. We do have an opportunity for an academic professional to come in, and that's not limited by geography. I think anywhere from the University of Memphis to ETSU, we have folks that can contribute there for the person who gets to make that appointment. So I tried not to put it specific on some of those areas. You will see, and this may be the lead up to your question, that we specifically included Hamilton and Ray counties and Unicoi County. That's one of the changes I made. I was remiss in not doing that. I managed operations for nuclear fuels up in Irwin, where all the fuel for the United States Navy's made for our submarines and our carriers, and I omitted them in the first copy. So I repented of that and made sure that I got that put back in there. You'll also see that there's a specific call out of Oak Ridge, Roane, and Anderson County. And that's to address, quite honestly, something that we had left out in both the executive order and the Energy Policy Advisory Council. I think that strip of land from Chattanooga area up to Unicoi County, and especially in Oak Ridge, is the most fertile soil for nuclear technology in the entire world. And if that's going to be the base load, you'll see a draw on that. That doesn't mean that all those folks have to come from East Tennessee. As I said, there are 225 nuclear type industries in the state of Tennessee. Some of those are nuclear manufacturing, where the uranium, plutonium, tritium, whatever, are not dealt with. It's metals. And some of those are going to be your middle and West Tennessee. So I suspect that in the wisdom of the speakers and the folks that make those appointments, some of that will solve itself, sir.
Representative Hardaway?
All right, just actually one question with two parts. Is there a specific role for TVA? Is there a specific role for MLGW?
Representative Fritz?
Memphis Light, Gas, and Water.
Thank you so much for that question. There is a specific role called out for TVA. We must have them on this committee. I suspect that would probably be Joe Hoagland, that he's currently filling that now. I have not called out the specifically for the utility of in Memphis. I have relied on using either cooperatives or municipals and those that represent those companies to be able to make good good decisions for the entire energy posture for the state of Tennessee.
Representative Hardaway?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a final statement, we're looking for options within Shelby County on energy. So I would encourage you to encourage those who are doing the appointing to involve some fair-minded people out of Shelby County. All right, thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the bill, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think maybe you've answered this in a roundabout way. I was going to ask you about the qualifications, but I'm assuming that will be based upon those persons who are already involved in energy in some way or the other, whether it's TVA or whatever. Would that be a reasonable statement?
Representative Fritz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, sir, that is a reasonable assumption. I think that those appointments have been made based on that largely now, and I think these changes certainly drive that same reliance upon the experience and the expertise from those specific areas. One of the things that Representative Hardaway just mentioned, and that's innovative energy sources, and that is certainly not geographically constrained within the state of Tennessee. We are working across the state to do things like cellulose to hydrogen production so that we can have a green fuel, clean green fuel that comes from a rather abundant fuel source that we're blessed to have here in the state of Tennessee of things like wood fiber.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't see a fiscal note on this. Will there be a fiscal note attached to this once this committee is in place?
Representative Fritz.
Thank you for that question. You'll see that in the next bill where the tasking comes out, Representative. There is a fiscal note when we get to House Bill 2038.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Vital.
Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. I just want to say I appreciate this bill and also want to recognize the importance of including Hamilton County and Ray County, where we have located both Sequoia Nuclear Power Plant and Watts Bar, which are an important part of this solution in the Tennessee Valley Corridor, which as it continues to expand with energy production and research, we can't forget the work, even though it's a small component of the work that's being done at Arnold Engineering Air Force Base and in Huntsville. The federal presence from Huntsville all the way to Oak Ridge is enormous. The investment in dollars is in the hundreds of billions of dollars, and we need to capitalize on that for Tennessee, East Tennessee, and Middle Tennessee energy sources. So thank you so much.
Representative Fritz.
Thank you. That is a great question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's a great comment, great question. It leads me to a thought there. Watts Bar 1 has a license deadline of 2035. And so as you get into like Watts Bar 2, which was recently commissioned, the life goes on out past 2050. Sequoia, I think there's a 2040 or 2042 or something's the first date on those. And so when I talk about base load, I have never distributed electrical power anywhere except when I start my generator and I have to be camping or hunting. But I do understand the goes intos and the comes out as of things pretty well. And establishing a reliable capability so that we don't have a necessity to ask people not to have electricity is tremendously important. My first meeting with Governor Lee after I was elected was on this topic. It was on this and one other topic. And it just so happened that meeting occurred a few days after the Christmas brownouts that we had. And you start to get into those peak loads. And we rely very much on Sequoia and Watts Bar, the Kingston steam plants, the coal-fired plants and natural gas plants that we have across the state for that base load. And part of what you'll see in the structure of this committee are subject matter experts that can help us address what the power providers and distributors would call peak shaving opportunities. So in January and February, our demand for electricity or kilowatts is usually much higher than it is the rest of the winter and the fall, and then again in July and August. So to be able to address those, you'll see the natural gas companies in as well. As we look toward that nuclear renaissance of small modular reactors and micro modular reactors, we have two long poles in the tent, I think, and what I have offered others. One of those long poles in the tent is establishing an authorization basis to be able to plant one of those small modular reactors in place. We're very good at small modular reactors, I can assure you that. But what we have not done is license those to be able to install them outside the city of Kingston or Lewisburg or any other state city in the state to provide that electrical power. I think that's going to be a long pole in the tent, getting the NRC to issue us a license for those. The other long pole in the tent, TVA currently uses a 3 to 5% isotopic concentration of U-235 to make power at Watts Bar and Sequoia. And I think that the folks that are going to bring on molten salt reactors and small modular reactors are going to want a little higher octane in their nuclear fuel to be able to be efficient. And so that's currently a bit of a long pole in the tent for not only Tennessee, but for the United States. We don't have a good domestic source for that. So with those two long poles in the tent and all that said, part of the reason that you're going to hear things like bridging strategies is doing things to keep our lights on until we can bring those old technologies with new applications into our state. So thank you for your question.
Representative Marsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate you bringing this and your experience and your expertise and your passion in this particular nuclear energy field. One question is the administration, do they think this is a better group than what they had lined up when they first did this last year? And why did you do this? And what's going to make your group better than what we already had?
Representative Fritz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Those are great questions. This is not intended to replace the governor's executive order 101. It could if he decided to do that, because it does sunset in November of this year. I do think that this approach is a little bit better because our State Energy Policy Advisory Council has been in place for some time. And this does a hybrid approach to those. The governor in his executive order was looking at nuclear supply chain. We weren't necessarily looking at that in the State Energy Policy Advisory Council. So that hybridization, if you will, of those two approaches, I think will make it stronger and better for us long-term, Representative. And that's part of the reason we took this. I'll offer this with a little bit of fun. Two of the bills that I have today, I've had mentors offer me that I should carry these bills. And so while I appreciate your kind words, the good ideas probably lie somewhere else. I'm just regurgitating those. And these two bills that these two fine fellows have given me have just about worked me to death. So careful what people offer you.
Representative Marsh, anything else? Okay. Representative Grills. Without objection, we will be voting on House Bill 2118 as amended. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. This moves on to Government Operations Committee. That brings us back to item number 1 on our calendar, House Bill 2038. We have a motion. We have a second. Representative Fritz, you're recognized on House Bill 2038.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, committee. And this bill does logically follow with what we have just discussed. And it follows by being the initial tasking for this newly structured team. And so as you'll recall, last year in session, we in the House passed a resolution that we were going to develop a Tennessee energy policy. And this year, the Senate passed that, and it's been signed in. So I think that was step 1. Step 2, we just talked about, and step 3 here is to issue that tasking. So very briefly, and I'll try to spend my time better. I talk about this stuff and perhaps talk more than I need to.
I see an amendment on this. Do we need to go ahead and put that on first?
Yes, sir. That would be good. That's 14922.
That's what we have. We have a motion and a second on the amendment. If that makes the bill, if you're ready to vote, we'll vote on adding this amendment to the bill. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Amendment drafting code 14922 goes on the bill. You're recognized on the bill as amended, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am going to try to be quick, and I'll entertain your questions more than me just talking. This bill does several things, one of which it commissions some studies. I talked in the previous bill about peak shaving. One of our opportunities for peak shaving, I think, is to use other fuel sources to generate electricity. And that could certainly include natural gas. So you'll see in the fiscal note that we talked about earlier, there's about $400,000 in a fiscal note on this for that commission of that study. And then there's another $217,000 that goes on that. This does have a cost to it. I think it has a cost to not doing it as well. I would offer that. This, I'm going to borrow a phrase. Again, many of the phrases and words I'll offer y'all today are things that are borrowed to learn from other people. But Toyota, Honda, Ford, General Motors all use what we refer to as just-in-time supply chains to make sure that they're efficient and effective in their manufacturing processes. Our energy supply had not done that in America for a long time. For instance, if you had a coal-fired plant, you had months of fuel laying on the ground ready to operate that plant, perhaps at Gallatin. With the nuclear systems, you have them loaded and fueled for 18 or 24-month cycles, sometimes longer than that, depending on the generation method. But much of what we've done with our energy policy in the United States and here in our state, and some to good, has created a just-in-time management of our energy. So this is something that Mr. Hoagland offered me one night in a conversation as we're developing through these bills, that we've went from a month's supply of energy to make electricity to a minute's supply. And so that it really becomes part of the importance of why we're doing this bill, is to make sure that we understand first what our electrical supply and demand signals are in the state of Tennessee and how that operates within the grid, and to understand what our natural gas supply and demand signals are and how those pipelines run and where they run, so that if there is a need for placement of additional electrical generating capacity within the state of Tennessee, we can properly place those. And so with that, I'll stop and take any questions that you may have on this and try not to talk this one to death.
Thank you so much, sir. Any questions or comments for the sponsor? Seeing none, Representative Halsey.
Thank you. Thank you for the bill, sponsor. My daddy retired from El Paso Natural Gas out in Colorado after 30 years. And when he left there, he was talking to me and said there's enough natural gas just under those plateaus out there. I don't know about here, but what's under the ground here, but out there is enough for 300 years. And it's clean and sufficient. And I appreciate your statement about reality driving politics. And second thing I want to tell you is I've never said this, but you would do well to teach all of us on presenting a bill. I bumble around up there, but you present a bill about as good and articulate and framed out common sense. The analytical flow in it is good. I've never said that in 10 years here, but I'll tell you, it's about the best I've heard, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Representative Halsey. I think we would echo that for sure.
I'm going to try not to cry, Chad. I know who I am, and I know that God's grace is sufficient. And I know that for some dumb old country boy like me to get to stand in front of y'all, I'm so humbled. I apologize. I'm so humbled to get to stand here, get to try to represent and help. So to God, all the glory.
Well, and I will add to that, he does do a very good presentation. It doesn't mean that I understand every bit of it, because your knowledge and expertise in the nuclear realm is so much above me that I just kind of jump in and hang on. But I do have a lot of trust in your knowledge and your integrity on a lot of things. So I appreciate that. Any other comments or questions? Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to see if the Denham Cowboy would define analytical flow for us.
Seeing no further comments or questions, we'll be voting if you're ready. All in favor of House Bill 2038 as amended, vote aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 2038 as amended moves on to Finance, Ways and Means. Thank you, sir. Representative Grills, you're recognized.
Mr. Chairman, if you would indulge me, can we take item number 4 out of order? House Bill 2842 by Representative Vital.
We have a request and a motion to take item number 4 now out of order. Without objection, we will do that. So item number 4 House Bill 2842, Representative Vital, you're recognized, sir. We have a motion and a second.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think drafting code 014982.
Yes, sir. That's
that
the
correct?
amendment. It rewrites the bill. We want to go ahead and put that on there. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Let me back up. I need a motion on that amendment and a second. I would take what your introduction as a motion, but I think this is more proper. So we have a motion and a second on the amendment. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendment goes on the bill. So you're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, this is a very simple bill that would clarify the activities covered under the agriculture exemption of the Water Quality Act as it relates to rock removal versus rock harvesting. And TDEC has worked with me on it. There's no opposition, and it basically will help our farmers and agriculture and forestry activities on small tracts of land. Thank you.
Okay. Representative Ritchie, you're recognized. Question's been called. No other comments or questions. Seeing no objections, we'll be voting on House Bill 2842. Okay, did you withdraw that? Okay, Representative Hardaway, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to the sponsor, the rock removal is more or less what we're trying to help the farmers with.
Representative Vital.
Thank you, sir. Yes, Representative Hardaway, deals with the small rock removal on your property or small acreage versus commercial operations. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments or questions, we'll be voting on House Bill 2842 as amended. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. This bill moves on to House Finance, Ways and Means Committee. Okay, that brings us back to, make sure I have all this, item number 2, House Bill 2063 by Representative Fritz. We have a motion. We have a second. As he sprints toward the microphone. And I do see an amendment on this. I want to ask you if you want to put that on at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, sir. I'd like to add Amendment 14295.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on drafting code 14295. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. That drafting code amendment goes on the bill, and you're recognized as amended, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee. I'm just more comfortable standing up here. That's the whole sprint back and forth thing. Why is this legislation needed, and what are we trying to accomplish here today? As amended, this new section to the Tennessee Air Quality Act prohibits the intentional injection, release, or dispersion of chemicals, chemical compounds, substances, or apparatus into our atmosphere within the border state of Tennessee for the sole or express purpose of affecting temperature, weather, or the intensity of solar radiation. Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation is the agency responsible for the enforcement of this Air Quality Act, and I've worked closely with them in writing this amended language. We've tried to take a very measured and realistic approach at something that is a significant issue. I'm convinced that maintaining clean air, water, and soil to grow our food in is absolutely important. And I offer this bill with that intent in mind, this very succinct bill. And Mr. Chairman, I'll stop taking any questions, or I think we have folks that want to testify. I'll certainly yield to that.
Okay, thank
Sure
you,
will.
sir. Representative Marsh, you have a question first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And what chemicals could be put in the air that would do this damage? And what is the area? What is Tennessee? How far up do our borders go, and where are our legal borders?
Representative Fritz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And those are both great questions. And so I'm going to try to take a shot at some of the things that our research has identified as chemicals that are currently being injected into the air or have been discussed being injected into the air for different reasons. Silver iodide, chemical symbol A, capital A, little gi, is one of the things I think you'll hear about in just a few moments. You will have hydrogen sulfide, and I brought copies of the material data sheets on all these chemicals so we can talk about the exposure risk. And if you're familiar, if you run an industry, many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with these. All of our chemicals are in industry that operates with those chemicals are required to keep material data sheets available so that we understand what exposure risks and all those. So I brought those if we need to look through them as well. Aluminum is one of the items that we found that has been discussed in being injected. Sulfur, hydrogen sulfide, hydrogen sulfate, sulfur dioxide are all chemicals that I found in research in different, probably 20 different sources that had been discussed. This technology is something that was developed in the 40s. The Soviet Russians had tried to apply this technology to control the weather in places like Siberia and to weaponize the use of these chemicals in the atmosphere. So I'm certain that's not the exhaustive list of all the chemicals that might be used. I think you may hear some other materials today from some of the expert testimony. And what is the range and the boundaries? So it's more easy for us to define the boundaries of the state of Tennessee as something shaped like this or like that from your all's perspective. The reason that we left it at the atmosphere in the bill and didn't put an altitude or anything in that, Representative, is because that is a tough thing to define. I do think that probably based on conversations I had with one of the gentlemen that's going to perhaps testify in a few minutes, you hear about the altitudes at which they inject some of those types of chemicals into the air today. And we put a reliance upon, again, TDEC being the licensing and permitting authority for things like this. And we very specifically wrote the legislation so that, and this was at great advice from TDEC, I think, again, so as not to harm legitimate industry. What we wanted to make sure that we had driven a stake in the ground is that we're not going to allow injection of chemicals into the air in Tennessee if we don't fully understand the risk and go through the permitting process. And so you all, I think, have all read the bill in and of it itself now, but it's within the borders of the state and into the atmosphere for the express purpose, and that's one of the key words in our bill, of affecting temperature, weather, or the intensity of sunlight is prohibited. I hope that helps. Yes.
Any other questions at this point before we go out of session? Representative Idle?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sponsor, quick question. Explain to me simply the difference between geoengineering and cloud seeding, because I think cloud seeding has been used for many years on smaller areas on farms to increase precipitation and weather conditions for farms versus the complete atmosphere. So thank you.
Representative Fritz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to make that a very succinct thing. And I'm not the subject matter expert on this to be able to probably give you the full definition. But geoengineering covers a broad application of processes that could be used to affect the temperature of the weather or the climate or the intensity of solar light. That could certainly include things like carbon capture. Depending on which source you look at, there's a Harvard source that refers to lots of these different processes as geoengineering. And typically we refine it down to one thing or another for the discussion. So geoengineering is a very broad term that covers lots of things, some of which I'm certain I'm not aware of.
Representative Idle?
So would your bill cover cloud seeding also?
Representative Fritz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, sir, it would. Yes, sir, it would.
Okay. At this point, if the committee so desires, we have two folks here to testify, one of which is a returning citizen that has been here a few times waiting to testify on this bill. So without objection, we'll go out of session to hear from them. We are out of session. First on my list, I have Dr. Denise Sibley. Thank you for being here and for being patient and for traveling back and forth to be able to have your input on this bill. We appreciate you being here. You'll have 3 minutes to testify. Just state your name and then we'll hear from you. And then if there are any questions or comments after that, we'll go back and forth.
Thank
You're
you.
recognized.
Before I begin, I'd like to insert two source documents. One
Here,
is the,
Can you just state your name for the record,
yes,
please?
Denise Sibley, Dr. Denise Sibley, from Johnson City, Tennessee, 35 years as internal medicine physician. I have TCA code 58-2-116 and a congressionally mandated research plan developed by the White House in June 2023. I think you all have a copy of that. So I'll begin. I'm a physician and I support healthy Tennesseans. I refer to this as the Atmospheric Protection Act. Several states, including New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Kentucky, Connecticut, Iowa, South Dakota, and Minnesota, are involved in actions to protect their atmosphere as well. Cloud seeding has been recognized for a long time in Maryland, 1965, 1967 in Pennsylvania. We, in our own code, TCA 58-2-116, specifically mention legal weather modification in our state. And the 44-page White House document generated in June 2023 was congressionally mandated, and it regarded the framework for governmental past, present, and future weather modification through solar radiation modification, which means attempts to cool the climate by reflecting sunlight using stratospheric aerosol injection, marine cloud brightening, and cirrus cloud thinning. There's no doubt that weather modification is taking place within our state. These actions of intentional manipulation of the atmosphere produce pollution and unintentional consequences that affect the health of our citizens, the safety of our water supply, our soil viability and crop production, ecosystem survival, precipitation extremes with flooding and drought, climate variability, and disruption of the economy. The spraying of sulfur dioxide in particular is causing acid rain, which is detrimental, and it acidifies the water supply and soil. In addition, heavy metals have been detected in rainwater samples in Tennessee from 2017 from Clarksville, Tennessee, that contain dangerous substances such as strontium, barium, aluminum, and sulfur. These toxins can be ingested, absorbed through the skin, and inhaled by humans and animals with deleterious health effects. We do not consent to this experimentation on our atmosphere and our citizens. We do not consent to the intentional blocking of the sun through the use of particulate aerosols and heavy metals. Blocking the sun would affect our crops with potential famine, deforestation, and blocking of vitamin D production, which is a major determinant of our natural immunity. We do not consent to this unnatural, godlike desire to control the heavens. If we fail to block these actions with legislation by providing our own governance, then we will continue to be manipulated by the federal government and the stakeholders that are mentioned. This is a 10th Amendment issue. Scientific American in February 2023 also reported on the UN 1 Atmosphere Global Governance for the experimentation and deployment of solar geoengineering and solar radiation modification, which would link all world governments under singular control. I urge you to support our 9th and 10th Amendments and to lead the nation. As Tennessee forcefully says, no, not in this state. We oppose polluting our atmosphere. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sibley. We have any questions for our guest, Representative Shaw?
Thank you, Doctor, for being here. Thank you. These, and I don't understand all the terminology, but this, whatever this is, it falls from cloud seeding that you talked about. How long does it last after it fall? Is it something that will affect your health a week later or only one day later, if I'm making any sense, or does it just continue on and on?
So this is like one doctor to another, Dr. Shaw. Thank you for
Yes.
that. Dr. Sibley?
And thank you, Mr.
Thank-
Chairman, for recognizing
you,
that I am a
Chairman.
doctor. Yes.
And Representative Shaw, that's a very good question. So if you spray in the troposphere, which is the lower part, that can hang around for 2 to 4 weeks and then fall out. If you spray in the upper stratosphere, then that can hang out for months, maybe years. So there is a difference as to the altitude at which you spray. In particular, we are concerned about the stratospheric aerosol injection because that lasts a long time and precipitates out. Thank you for that question.
Representative Shaw?
Can you tell me, and I'll probably ask this question again, but can you tell me the difference? I know farmers now use the spraying system, water spraying systems now, when they have a drought. to kind of get some moisture in the ground. Can you tell me the difference in getting moisture in the ground from spraying like they do now compared to cloud seeding?
Are you talking about just general irrigation systems?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, irrigation systems usually are located on the ground. They're manually on the ground, and they would spray water, such as a sod manufacturer who regularly does that. Cloud seeding is where you actually distribute a chemical particulate matter that causes nucleation. So something for the water vapor to grab onto, and it has to be done above in the troposphere, which is the lower, or the stratosphere. And that's a big difference because it has to be put there either by, and there is a schematic here of different planes and various ways that they can be put in the stratosphere or in the troposphere. And it can be a balloon, it can be an aircraft, it can be a drone. NASA has aircraft, NOAA has aircraft, all National Academy of Sciences, all these people have aircraft that can do that. So one is ground oriented and one has to go up in the sky.
Thank you.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Reedy.
God, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is going to be an interesting question, and my question would be the health concerns of this, but it was 1980 as a boy growing up in Idaho, Mount St. Helens erupted. And as a young man watching the sky covered for weeks on end, do you have any idea what the fallout from that health-wise would be from Mount St. Helens as far as acid rain or anything like that?
Dr. Sibley.
Thank you. That's a very good question. And in particular, in 1991, Mount Pinatubo erupted and caused a great cloud cover, and it actually decreased the temperature 0.5% centigrade or 0.5 degrees centigrade. And so it caused not only a lowering of the temperature of the earth, but yes, whatever sulfur dioxide, acid rain, all kinds of chemicals, those are natural ways that the stratosphere and troposphere are injected, and they do have consequences. Many people around those places have respiratory issues, in particular if they have COPD or asthma. It can also affect if it lands on your skin and be irritative to your skin. So yes, there are many people were told to stay indoors during times like that.
Representative Reedy.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so with that, this man-made idea of cloud seeding or chemtrails or just whatever, are we seeing about the same effect, but that become man-made instead of just environmental?
Dr. Sibley.
Thank you, sir. A cloud seeding or weather modification does have particulate matter and chemicals that are released intentionally, and they do fall to earth. So yes, they would contaminate anything they fall on, depending on what's released. So it could be sulfur, it could be silver, it could be aluminum, which does not normally occur unbound. So yes, sir, those are intentional acts to release things into our atmosphere.
Thank you for that. Representative Halsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Doc, for being here. You're one of my best friends, and you're one of the best friends of this legislature. You helped a whole lot of legislators back 3 or 4 years ago, providing them with information and helping. They're very grateful, and so am I. I'm glad you're here. I have wondered for a long time, of course, you get accused that this is all conspiratorial, but there must be a whole lot of other states that think it's other than conspiratorial because they're moving in that direction to stop what's going on here and what could come on in the future too. But I've read some cases where plant life, agriculture, when tested, turns up positive for sulfur dioxide and aluminum also. And what I've wondered, and that's all I'm asking, do you think it's a valid concern? I tried to raise honeybees, And keeping bees alive is a real hard thing nowadays. And do you think that this activity could possibly be part of the problem on the decline of bees in this country?
Dr. Sibley.
Thank you. Yes, I do. Whatever is up in the atmosphere is going to come down, and we know from water samples here that we have abnormal things. We shouldn't have barium, aluminum, strontium in our water. And, these two source documents validate that this is happening. I mean, this is a White House produced, congressionally mandated packet, and this is our own Tennessee code that says it's allowable as my source documents. But yes, say aluminum is especially toxic to trees. Aluminum we know is toxic to humans as a neurological toxin. There sulfuric acid falling as rain is dangerous. Yes, I do believe it has a strong indication for our ecosystem and for our bees, for our agriculture, the growing of food. Yes, sir. And the cattle and all the livestock and other animals that depend on water supply and good soil.
Representative Hosey. You vote. Okay. Representative Ritchie.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Sibley, for being here. I have two different questions. First question, when it comes to the actual use of these chemicals for cloud seeding, for example, do we know the percentage of the states that are using it and at what level they're using it in comparison with, say, here in Tennessee?
Dr. Sibley.
I do not know the percentage of states that are using it. I would say, looking at how long it's been going on since the 40s, that just about every country and every state's using it. That's my personal opinion. I don't have a document that I could point you to. I like to use source documents, but it's been going on a long, long time. It's well developed. I don't know if that answers your question, sir.
Representative Ritchie.
Well, and then the second question is when it comes to, so these particular chemicals get deployed into whatever airspace above that it's going to be the most effective at. Then what happens is it attracts the molecules to be able to capture the moisture that's then going to end up precipitating and falling down. Those molecules are coming from somewhere else. Is there any data that shows that by doing this cloud seeding, that it's actually taken potential rainfall from other locations and very targeted in? Because whenever I was doing some research on this, and they're talking about a lot of the mega droughts out west and doing this right here, and they're trying to combat that. They can't just make water out of nowhere for it to fall down. So they've got to deploy these molecules to be able to attract it in, to be able to disperse it in that location. They're one. Is there any data that you're aware of that sheds light on we're actually taking that rainfall from somewhere else to be able to put it here?
Dr. Sibley.
Thank you. Yes, sir, that's a very good question, and there is some disagreement among scientists about that. But yes, taking water from one place has created droughts in other places. We know that to form, to cloud seed or to form precipitation, we need water vapor. We need a nucleating agent for that to hang on to. And then we need some energy source. And so those are the three things needed for cloud seeding, for precipitation. And, there's been some, shall I say, weather warfare developed using this. But one of the things we're also really involved in is that this solar radiation modification, really the express purpose of it is to create a reflective boundary and to reflect the sun back, the sun's energy, the sun's heat, the sun's ray back into the atmosphere so that it does not reach the earth. And this would be in accord with the Paris Agreement, which said we're going to try to limit the heating of the earth to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So the whole term of solar radiation modification, there is a schematic in your in that document as well. It shows where we're trying to bounce the waves of sunlight off of reflective things like aluminum, and different things that reflect it. So anything that would be reflective. And that's what gives you kind of the hazy reflective sky and the white brightening of the sky. And that's even called, there's marine cloud brightening, which is something they do over the water, similar to that.
Representative Ritchie? Okay. Representative Grills?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just out of curiosity, I'm sitting up here just listening to these different things. In your professional opinion, do you feel like this is this is causing any type of cancer or anything in a widespread effect?
Dr. Sibley?
I think we do live in a toxic environment that comes from a number of sources, and definitely the CDC has admitted we have a cancer increase. So it's due to something. It can't be genetic in just a couple of years or in even a 30-year period. So my personal opinion, I think it contributes to a toxicity to our genome. Yes, sir.
Representative Grills?
But there's no studies out there that actually have proven that this is the reason for it or anything of that nature. Or I'm not trying to put you in a trick bag. I'm just seriously just trying to figure out what's going on here.
Dr. Sibley?
You know, there may be, but I don't know of those specifically. So to answer honestly, I'm not
I
sure.
appreciate you being honest. Too.
Mhm.
I really
I'm
do.
not sure.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. Next, we have Representative Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the witness, I looked up the report that you mentioned from the White House, and on the page where this report is provided, it states that this report does not signify any change in policy or activity by the Biden-Harris administration, which remains focused on reducing emissions, increasing resilience, advancing environmental justice, and achieving true energy security. Release of this report fulfills a congressional mandate, and there are no plans underway to establish a comprehensive research program focused on solar radiation modification. This is on the White House website that this report is included with, and so it's refuting, I guess, the assertion that was made today that this is happening. Do you think that this is happening secretly? Is that what your claim is, that this type of solar radiation modification, geoengineering, cloud modification, do you think it's happening secretly by our government? Is that what you're trying to tell us?
Dr. Sibley?
Thank you for that question. On page 43 in the second paragraph, it says the federal government conducts or funds limited research into solar radiation modification. Congress has directed NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, to fund SRM research as part of its Earth radiation budget program for the last several years. So something must have been happening. And then on page 6 and 12, they do mention this term, which I found disturbing, covertly and openly, twice. And that's a direct quotation, covertly and openly, twice. So that's just from their document, not mine.
Thank you for that. Representative Jones?
Thank you. So you think this is happening secretly by the government? According to a Harvard research group, they state that if there was truly a large-scale program which involved aircraft introducing hazardous chemicals, there would first need to be an operating system to manufacture and disperse materials. Additionally, if such a system existed, it would require the work and cooperation of thousands of people, which would make it difficult to maintain a secret. According to Harvard, extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. The claim that there is a large-scale secret program to spray materials from aircraft is extraordinary, yet all the evidence we have seen to date has been very weak. According to this Harvard research group, the most common claim is simply that aircraft contrails look different without any comparative analysis. And so I'm just trying to logically follow your assertion that the government is secretly spraying these chemicals. And then you also stated in your initial statement that this is a part of a one world agenda. Can you talk about that? You said a one atmosphere agenda. Can you tell us a little bit about what you think that one atmosphere agenda is from United Nations that you brought up in your beginning statements?
Dr. Sibley?
Thank you. Yes, the UN in February of 2023 did report on a one atmosphere global governments for experimentation and deployment of solar geoengineering and SRM. And it's similar to their One Health approach, and they have a lot of one one approaches. I know that there are multiplicity of patents that deal with substances, dispersion models, ways to do this, what substances are used. The patents are generally available. I have one from Eastman, since I'm very next to Eastern in Johnson City, that was just generated last year that used it used the bioplastics to disperse and nucleate for precipitation. I will also point you to page 20, which is a United States generated picture of all the aircraft that are deployed at the various altitudes. And again, this is their document. It says what the payload is. It says how long they can operate. So I think there's evidence in my source documents that say that this is happening, and that the government recognizes it. And again, our state of Tennessee recognizes it because we have a law.
Representative Jones.
Thank you. I just wanted to direct my colleagues and ask you about this. We have a
Can you activate your microphone, sir?
Sorry, thank you. I just wanted to ask the witness and also ask my colleagues about something, because we have fiscal review that looks up the fiscal note on our bills. And fiscal review, which we know is nonpartisan, independent of any of the politics here, said that this bill would have no fiscal impact. According to fiscal review, it is assumed that the action prohibited by this legislation is not currently occurring in the state, nor will it in the future. Therefore, this legislation will result in no significant fiscal impact on state government. So according to fiscal review, this is not happening, nor will it happen. And from their research, this is something that does not exist in Tennessee. So that's just something I wanted to point out. I don't know if you'd mind responding to our state government's position that this is not happening from the fiscal review department.
Dr. Sibley.
Thank you. I do know that Tennessee Congressman Fleshman's report from United States Congress on 119 on geoengineering, that's the fiscal budget for fiscal year 2024, gives a recommendation to budget $39 million to improve the understanding of cloud, aerosol, precipitation, and radiation processes. So that would be my answer, is that the federal government is recognizing it. So, that's my answer, is the federal government recognizes it, and
Representative-
our state has a law about it.
Thank you. Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, ma'am.
Thank you.
My questions are trying to get straight in my head. If we're going to regulate something, whether it's within our state boundaries, so how far up can we regulate? To what altitude do our state boundaries extend? Is it 50 miles, 60 miles international line for space, or 62 miles, I guess?
Dr. Sibley, and you're not expected to know
Thank
necessarily
you.
legal answers, but
I'm not sure about legally how far up, the column of atmosphere would extend for Tennessee. But I do know that, some of these, like the NASA Global Hawk, can fly at 65,000 feet and is an uncrewed vehicle that has a huge payload and can go for 12 hours. But I'm not sure federally what what the top of our domain is for our reach.
Representative Hardaway.
Would it reach the typical flight patterns for the planes that we're talking about that are generating the chemtrails?
Dr. Sibley.
We're not really talking about chemtrails in here. We're talking about the geoengineering and the solar radiation modification, because that term doesn't appear in here. But I don't know federally what the law is, but I would imagine, this is my guess, I'm going to preface it with my guess that it would include, because most of those fly under, they're 12 to 16 miles up or so, something like that, I believe. I'm not a pilot, but tried to learn.
Representative Hardaway.
And the seeding or the solar modification, that would be within state boundaries also?
Dr.
Yes,
Sibley.
sir. Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir, within state boundaries.
Okay.
Representative Hardaway.
All right. And on the matter of the why that some of these ventures are undertaken, it's going to all come back to climate change. And can you give us the relationship between the impact of this bill and climate change as you see it?
And what was the first, the why? Is that what you asked?
Yes, ma'am.
What is the why? So yes, they would say that we need this for climate change, the solar radiation management. We need to bounce the sun back to prevent warming. And we need to form this reflective barrier in the stratosphere to reflect the sun back so that we can lower the temperature in accord with the Paris Agreement, 1.5 degrees Celsius. That would be I think that would be their argument.
Representative Hardaway.
All right. And would you say that the rise in temperature is the lead for global disaster as opposed to the means of bouncing that sun ray back?
No, I'm
Dr.
sorry.
Sibley.
Say that again. I'm
All
sorry.
right. If you have to have a trade-off with the solar modification versus the rise in temperature for the Earth, which would you take, or is there a happy medium?
Dr. Sibley.
That's a complicated question because my understanding, when you form this reflective barrier, you're also not allowing the Earth to breathe, essentially, to get the heat that's comes from the Earth out of the atmosphere. So yes, you're reflecting some rays up, but you also have heat here that's trapped. And so they have surmised that we would do this during the day, but not at night, and let the heat go up, because otherwise you can kind of trap things and keep it warmer. So I don't know if that answers your question, but there are unintended consequences that this document talks about. And again, I'm going to stick with my source document. There are unintended consequences that we do not know, and they talk about them extensively. Known and unknown consequences. What is this going to do? What is this going to do to the health of our plant? What is it going to do to the plants? Are we going to be able to decrease the temperature or raise the temperature? What are we going to do with droughts and too much rainfall, monsoons? So it's a complicated question, more so than I think I want to get into here.
Representative Hardaway. And we
Thank
have
you.
another
And-
guest to testify today, so I wanted to keep this moving if we can.
All right. Thank you, Chairman. And I'll agree it's a complicated question and just centering on one facet of it won't give us the ability to do justice here. But I gotta take advantage of one thing you said. You cited unintended consequences from reference to one of your source documents. Ma'am, we're the Tennessee legislature. We specialize in unintended consequences. So thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Representative Halsey.
I just want to say, I don't know what the federal boys think about it, but I used to own an airplane. You have Tennessee airspace, goes up in a column. At a certain altitude, you have controlled airspace by Tennessee FAA rules and regulations. But at the end of the day, we're not dealing with that. We're dealing with the residual effect of what happens when it gets to the ground. That's where the whole issue's at, is what it does to us who live here on the ground in Tennessee. and the effect that it has on us. So just want to point that out.
Thank you, sir. Any last thing? Yes, Dr. Sibley.
May I respond to that? And also, one thing that's mentioned throughout this document is the risk versus risk. And they use that term many times. What are the risk of doing this versus not doing it? Are the risk of climate change more than the risk of this solar radiation modification? And that's a good question. In our mind, we want to have governance over experimentation or anticipated experimentation or actual deployment of anything that would pollute our atmosphere and affect our health. That's what my 35 years of my occupation have been, is to guard health. So this is a governance issue that we would be allowed to govern our own state. According to the 10th Amendment, the atmosphere wasn't given to the federal government under the enumerated rights.
Thank you, Dr. Sibley. We appreciate you being here and again for traveling back numerous times to be in front of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next to testify, we have Mr. Augustus Dorico. You're welcome to take the same seat or stand there, either one. And there's a button that looks like a symbol, and if you can hit that and the red light will come on.
Think it is. Is
Yes,
it on?
and state your name and who you're with, and you'll have 3 minutes, and then we'll go back with questions and answers. You're recognized.
My name is Augustus Dorico, and I'm the owner of Rainmaker, a cloud seeding company that makes it rain and snow more over farms, ski resorts, water, and hydroelectric utilities. And I'm here today because in all things, I aspire to be a faithful Christian, and part of that means stewarding creation and stewarding all of what God has put on this green earth. I have no intention and no desire to play God, but again, want to serve him. And part of what I'm concerned about in Bill 2063 is that it would prevent Tennessee from stewarding creation with all the tools it has available. Part of the bill pertains to stratospheric aerosol injection, which is an altogether different technology from cloud seeding. And so I thought that I would talk about what cloud seeding is, what stratospheric aerosol injection is, the differences, and the regulatory frameworks that exist in the United States for these industries. So first, SAI, or SRM, stratospheric aerosol injection, or solar radiation management, is, as mentioned before, something that the Biden administration has released a report on. It's an attempt to cool the planet by emitting reflective aerosols into the upper atmosphere. Although, as a technologist, I'm interested in all sorts of new tools that humanity can use. There have been no large scale, there have been almost none at all operational programs of solar radiation management, or SAI. So we have no experimental data as to what its effects would be, even though volcanoes might be modeled to be similar. What we do know about SAI is that its effects would be global, and the aerosols would stay in the atmosphere for years after emission. Once you turn it on, it's hard to turn it off. Is any of this true of cloud seeding? No, it is not. Cloud seeding is the intentional modification of precipitation from clouds by emitting silver iodide into them. Silver iodide has a crystal structure that's almost identical to ice, and so water easily freezes onto it into sufficiently large and heavy ice crystals such that they fall as snow or melt back down into rain. Cloud seeding was unfortunately, Rep. Fritz, not invented by the Soviets. I think it would be a great disservice to American innovation if we were to credit them with that. It was Irving Langmuir, an American physicist in 1946, that discovered it. And it has existed since 1946. It's been operational and researched since 1946. And the resounding body of evidence that we have on its efficacy and safety is that it is safe. In areas where cloud seeding has existed for decades, there has been no evidence of it increasing past naturally occurring levels of silver. Mind you, not strontium, not aluminum, not sulfur. Silver iodide is what is used in cloud seeding operations, none of that which was listed by the other witness. Even if it were to bioaccumulate, I have a study there available for you on the minimal effects that it would have, negligible effects that it would have on the environment, on crops, on cattle, and on human health. In fact, many people have found that it is so safe and so beneficial that states like Texas, Idaho, Wyoming, Utah, and Nevada, just to name a handful, not only permit cloud seeding to exist, but they pay for it at a state level to benefit their agricultural and water supply interests. Moreover, North Dakota another state that has a cloud seeding program, they estimate a $21 million annual benefit to the state's agriculture from it. So I would just ask you if you are in favor of China having better technology than the United States, I would ask that you vote for this bill as it is. If you're in favor of depriving farmers in Tennessee from having the best technology available in other states, I would ask you to vote for the bill as it is. I would ask if you are in favor of big government regulating technologies and businesses like mine out of existence, then vote for the bill as it is. But if you don't favor any of those things, please consider a permitting process like that which exists in California or Texas or Idaho or Wyoming.
Thank you, Ms. Dorco. Do we have any questions, comments for our guest? We have Representative Ritchie first.
Thank you. And just wanted to ask basically the same two questions that I'd asked Dr. Sibley. Do you know the percentage of use of clouds? And that's where I'm more focused on through this whole broad geoengineering spectrum that we're looking at is the cloud seeding. Do you know the percentage of cloud seeding taking place in the different states, or approximately like where Tennessee ranks on that list in comparison? Like who's doing it the most? And then where's Tennessee on the list, I guess?
Mr. Dorco.
Sure. The Western American states have by far the most. Idaho has the most. Utah, I believe, after that, then Texas, then Wyoming, then California, if I'm ranking them correctly. Tennessee currently does not have much at all in the way of weather modification going on.
Representative Ritchie.
And with the Western states doing it, that's where a lot of my concerns comes with this. When you end up looking at where we see the biggest areas in the United States for wildfires, for drought situations to begin with, I think God created this earth and set everything up. Going back to whether it's fourth or fifth grade science, I still remember seeing that little picture that showed the cloud, and then there was another image of the rain falling down, and then there was an image of the sun heating up the ground and that moisture rising back up, collected back into the clouds. When we change what's naturally happening in science and we're manipulating it, I think we're seeing adverse effects out west with these wildfires, with these extreme droughts, and I don't want that stuff coming here to Tennessee. Thanks for coming in here today, but I couldn't be on the opposite side of what you're saying just based off of what the results of what's happening out west are currently. So thank you.
Mr. Dorco.
Well, first of all, sir, I would say that in Genesis, man is told to steward the garden, right? And then in Genesis 1:28, we're told to take dominion over the earth, the seas, and the skies. We currently farm, which is modifying what God has given us. We build reservoirs to redirect the flow of rivers and streams, which is modifying what God has given us. I would say that although it is a reasonable concern to say that maybe we're taking water from one place and giving it to another, we have research from the National Center of Atmospheric Research and multiple other universities that says cloud seeding is positive sum and not depleting water supplies in areas over which it's occurring or in extra areas beyond where it's occurring. And so what I would challenge you to do is provide any evidence whatsoever that any of the wildfire or drought that you're seeing in the American West is a consequence of cloud seeding rather than something that's being mitigated by cloud seeding.
We have Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Chairman. And I would certainly agree with your last statement, sir. We're in the middle of trying to manage the disastrous effects that we have already had on God's green earth. You may be in a better position to answer my lingering question on how high our regulatory authority goes. In the states where you are permitted, the states where you actually do your work, is there any reference to altitude?
Mr. Dorco.
Now, this ought to be double checked, but I believe that the FAA gives Class A airspace authorization up to 18,000 feet. All cloud seeding activities, almost all cloud seeding activities generally happen between 3,000 and 18,000 feet. Above that is no longer Class A airspace. I do not believe states any longer have jurisdiction over that, and that's the area over which solar radiation management, or SAI, would be occurring.
Representative Hardaway.
And would that permitting be state and federal?
So for all of our operations, we've had to submit an application for operation to NOAA first, which is federal, and then we've had to get permits for our operation from the FAA. And it varies on a state-by-state basis what permits you need after that. In California, you can go through the California Environmental Quality Act. In Texas, you go through the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, and I'll wrap up here, but you do work from Texas to California, and I'll assume unless you were successful, you wouldn't still be in business. And those two states are about as opposite in terms of their approach and their political leanings and their scientific understanding of climate change, et cetera. So I appreciate your balanced view of just how this legislation will impact everything.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Dorco. Appreciate you coming to help us with this. Without objection, we'll go back into session. We are back in session now on House Bill 2063 as amended. Representative Jones, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's a more appropriate question for the sponsor. Looking at the fiscal note on your bill, the fiscal review team, which is nonpartisan, non-political, said that this will have no significant fiscal impact because this is not happening, nor do they anticipate from their research this happening in the future. Can you respond to that fiscal note from the fiscal review team here in the state capitol?
Representative Fritz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be happy to. Our team that do our fiscal notes do a good job at what they do, but they're not scientists. And they don't have that ever-present knowledge of everything that's going on. I would offer that what we're trying to do here is protect the water, the air, and the soil in Tennessee. And until we understand these things better. I certainly think I met with Mr. DeRico yesterday. He makes a compelling argument about lots of things. Very intelligent young man. But I learned in the career and work experience I had that where there was a possibility, even a slight possibility, but sometimes a great possibility of risk to humans, that you take a very measured approach at it. And that's what we're doing here. If you look at the MDS for some of these materials that are being deposited into the atmosphere today by Mr. DeRico's testimony, and according to what research I did on that, certainly he's an expert in it, I'm not, but silver iodide photodecomposes, and it photodecomposes to silver and to iodine gas. And so one of our responsibilities in our position here, rather than try to perhaps give too much credence to the scientific approach to what our fiscal people have evaluated, is to think about those entry routes for these chemicals into our bodies: ingestion, inhalation, and absorption. And so if you look at the MSDS or MDS for each one of these chemicals that we've talked about, each one of them poses some level of risk in those areas. So I'm not suggesting that we never, ever, ever do anything to cloud seed. I'm not. I go back to an example, and I'll be quick with this, Mr. Chairman. I go back to an example that's referred to, and I would encourage you to look this up. Tickling the dragon's tail. And in the 1940s, we didn't fully understand the impacts of radiation. And so we had good men and women that were working on ways to better understand that, and they did it in very controlled, very small, isolated areas for the most case to understand what the effects were. And on that fateful day, a guy named Dr. Lewis Slotin, who had a plutonium sphere that was fully moderated at the accident that resulted in his death. Now, we learned a lot from that, but what I would offer to you, Representative, is we don't have room to risk the lives of our constituents by moving too fast with this. And so this bill simply does that. It simply says that it's prohibited, and it puts the authority back in the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation to have conversations with bright young folks like Mr. DeRico, but to prohibit it and take a very measured approach.
Representative Jones.
Thank you. I think my concern when I'm hearing Representative Fritz, I heard a colleague on this committee say that, there's this, because of this activity, we have less bees, and there's all this trying to correlate what is clearly the climate crisis with what we're trying to make out as a secret conspiracy by the government to spray things in the atmosphere. That's what sounds strange to me. We see droughts, we see less bees, we see these things happening, but one thing we won't talk about is connecting this to the reality of climate change. Do you believe that climate change is responsible for these things, or do you believe it's part of this conspiracy that the witness brought up, that the government is secretly trying to spray things into the atmosphere without our knowledge, which I just think it's insulting to the intelligence of Tennesseans. And so I'm curious what you think. Do you believe in climate change, and do you think that that is responsible for some of the things that we're seeing, or do you think it is this geoengineering that you're presenting this legislation around?
Representative Fritz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the premise of your question is wrong. Because you obviously were not listening to the witness and have not read the document. It is not a secret. It is written in that White House document. They're not making a secret that they want to do this. So that interrupts the premise of your question. And to answer your question about climate change, I think that we have developed industry to control power and to make money over scaring folks like you to death.
Representative Grills, you're recognized.
Point of order. Point of order.
Question's been called. We have objections. We have 2 objections. We don't have 3. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. This moves on to calendar and rules. All
Thank you.
remaining bills on today's calendar will be rolled to next week's calendar. Do I have a motion to adjourn? We have motion second. Without objection, we're adjourned.